What's with all the cleaning? There is still dust on the floor. Polish it up again so that it shines so brightly you can see your face.
My heart ached as I was yelled at this morning for the way I cleaned. I am Grace, a 35-year-old office worker. My husband William and I got married 10 years ago. And when we first got married, I believed that we were going to have a happy life together. But soon after we got married, he told me that we were going to live with my parents-in-law, as if it was already decided that we would live together. What do you mean we are going to live together? I haven't heard anything about it. I had heard nothing at all about it, and I was not happy with the decision.
Whatever you say, this is a done deal. From now on, you're going to live with my parents.
Actually, I don't think very well of my mother-in-law. I went to my in-law's house to greet my marriage, but when she saw me, she said, "I'm not at all happy to get such a poor daughter. She is older than William, and I don't think she can give birth to a strong child." I was so shocked to hear her say that to me within 5 minutes of meeting her that I couldn't shut my mouth.
What are you talking about, Mom? That's rude.
My father-in-law was quick to follow up. My mother-in-law, who did not like the fact that my father-in-law took my side, continued to spout a lot of nonsense. She was making so much noise that I couldn't hear what she was saying, and the place turned into a battlefield. This was my first encounter with my mother-in-law. After this incident, I did not think much of my mother-in-law. After that, my mother-in-law tried hard to get me and William separated. Somehow, my father-in-law and William managed to convince her, and we managed to get married. As marriage didn't mean living together, I thought it would be fine if I could get away with it. I had no idea that we would end up living together. I don't want to live with her. I don't have the confidence to get along with that mother-in-law. I desperately tried to tell William how I felt, but he seemed to have made up his mind. My mom says if we don't live with her, I have to leave you. My dad isn't feeling well either, so help her out. In fact, at this time, my father-in-law seemed to be getting sick more often and coming down more frequently. It is true that I worry about my father-in-law from the bottom of my heart. And it is also true that he has been desperately trying to protect me from my mother-in-law. So I want to help him somehow. But I can't bear to live with my mother-in-law. When I told William about this, he started calling my mother-in-law right then and there. This is definitely going to cause trouble. I was prepared for that. A few days later, my mother-in-law came to our house and tearfully said, "I'm sorry, Grace, I'm sorry. I promise I will never speak ill of you again." That mother-in-law got down on her knees with tears in her eyes. I had never thought she would do such a thing, and I was just so upset at the sight of her. As I was upset, William, who was standing beside me, said, "Mom is also apologizing so much. You should think about moving in with us." Those words made me unable to say anything. Eventually, I accepted my mother-in-law's apology and moved in with her. I had no idea at the time that this would be the entrance to hell. As soon as we moved in together, my mother-in-law started treating me like a servant. She forced me to do all the housework and spent her days lying around watching TV. I work full-time on weekdays, and lately my work has been so busy that I have to work overtime a lot. In the worst case, I often come home at 2,300 hours. I told her that I would be home late for work, but he said, "Let the other employees do the overtime. Your job is to do the housework, so get your ass back here." She always yells at me over the phone so loudly that it hurts my ears, which really annoys me. She yells so loudly that the conversation leaks outside and the employees around me can hear it. There were times when I forgot I was at work and burst into tears. When I returned home after work exhausted, I was shocked at the sight before me. There were many dishes in the kitchen that had not been washed and left in the sink, and the laundry had been hung out to dry. Everything was left as it was, and my burden was so great that I would collapse if things continued as they were. I asked my mother-in-law to help me with the housework as much as she could, but she said, "If you can't do the housework properly, you should quit your job." William, who was listening to her, said, "Mama's right. If you do things halfway, quit your job." Mother and son are alike. They only said that I was the one to blame. I came home late every day, did all the housework that had piled up, and eventually went to bed at 2 o'clock. Then I woke up at 6 o'clock to prepare breakfast, make lunch boxes, and prepare lunch for my mother-in-law and father-in-law before going to work. Even though it was before work, my body was already tired. Soon after that, my father-in-law passed away while fighting an illness. I felt a huge surge of anxiety at the thought that there was no one left to protect me. My anxiety was correct, and my mother-in-law's snubbing of her daughter-in-law accelerated. She can't seem to stop complaining about everything from the seasoning of my cooking to the way I cleans the house to my appearance. She is like this from the time she wakes up in the morning until she goes to bed. Recently, she often calls me at work and says, "Today's the day, don't work overtime, come home early." If I could do such a thing, I wouldn't have a hard time. What I don't like about my mother-in-law is that she keeps calling and calling until the person answers the phone. If I still don't pick up, she even calls the company. My boss, who knows what's going on, says it's crazy that she even calls the office. He began to worry that it might be better to get a divorce. Indeed, I thought that I might as well get a divorce if she went this far. However, my mother-in-law was verbally abusive and had me cornered, and I was unable to make a decision and take action. And in the blink of an eye, we have been married for 10 years, and I still cannot have children. My mother-in-law told me every day, "You barren woman." William is the eldest son and heir to this family. The wife of eldest son has to have a boy right away. I can't even have a child, and now she's telling me that I must have a boy, which is driving me crazy. I was also concerned about why I could not have a child, so I went to the hospital to have an examination. If there was a cause for my inability to have a child, I would take time off work to get it thoroughly cured. That's what I thought. The doctor told me that there was nothing unusual. There was no cause, yet I could not have children. Then why can't he have children for 10 years? The doctor told me that William should have a checkup too. So I told William to get a test as soon as I got home. But William insisted that he didn't need the test and that it was my fault that we couldn't have children. My mother-in-law was furious and said, "There is nothing wrong with my son. It is you who are to blame. You are incompetent. That's why you can't have children." She pushed me away. I fell on my backside. William looked at me coldly, and my mother-in-law only mocked me. I was left with a deep wound in my heart. This was the beginning of my health condition getting worse and worse. I made more and more small mistakes at work, and I could not enjoy talking to anyone. I couldn't even eat, and people around me were surprised to see my skinny and pale face and said, "Grace, let's go to the hospital together." This is strange. My best friend Mary, who joined the company in the same year, couldn't stand to see me and took me to the hospital. The diagnosis was depression. I was told that it was caused by stress. The cause of my stress, it must be my mother-in-law and husband now. I was very dizzy and fatigued and in no condition to work. I left work early that day, went home, and decided to lie down. Then she said, "You lazy person, what are you sleeping so carelessly? Why don't you get on with your chores?" Suddenly, she came to my room, rolled up the blanket, and woke me up. "I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well right now. Can I get some rest? My mother-in-law, enraged by these words, dragged me out of bed the next moment. What are you doing? Please don't do that. When I desperately told her to stop, she picked up a cane that was nearby and said, "You worthless bitch, you're lying to me about being sick. Stop lying to me about how sick you are and get on with your chores." With that, she punched me on the shoulder with a cane in her hand. For a moment, I froze, not understanding what had just happened. Soon after that came the intense pain, and I finally realized that I had been hit. Feeling myself about to be hit again, I grabbed my bag and ran out of the house. After that, I drove the car frantically, selflessly. In a state of extreme excitement, I forgot about the pain, moved the steering wheel, and managed to reach my parents' house. It had been 10 years since I had returned to my parents' house. Since I got married and moved in with my in-laws, I was not allowed to even go back to my parents' house, and the only way to contact them was by phone or messenger. I pressed the intercom button with a trembling hand. However, the pain and shock had exhausted my strength, and my sights went completely black and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I saw a strange ceiling and realized that I was in a hospital. My parents were by my side, looking at me with concern, and they said, "You found out, Grace. Thank God. Are you all right?"
I was surprised to hear her yell out that Grace was collapsed in the front of our house. What happened?
I was relieved to hear my parents' voices, which I hadn't heard in a long time. I cried aloud. This is something, they thought, and my parents waited for me to calm down. Then I decided to tell them all about what my mother-in-law and husband usually did to me and how she beat me with a cane. When my father heard this, he was trembling with anger, and I could see his face turning red. He suddenly got up and tried to go away. "Dad, where are you going?" Startled, I called my father to stop him as he was leaving, but he said, "Don't worry. Leave the rest to me. Mom, take care of Grace." With these words, he went away. My mom seemed to have guessed what was going on and said, "Leave everything to your father." That was all she said, and I could not understand what was going on. My father left the hospital room and immediately took out his phone and started calling a certain place. The somewhere was my father's brother. My father's brother, Uncle Daniel, is an amazing man who manages multiple properties, including land and condominiums. Moreover, Uncle Daniel and my late father-in-law knew each other, and my uncle also manages the rented house where my parents-in-law live. When William was still young, his parents-in-law did not have much money, so Uncle Daniel offered that rented house to them at a reasonable price. Even after my father-in-law passed away, he did not raise the fee for the use of the rented house because I was living there. Uncle Daniel had no idea that I was being subjected to such insidious bullying. For a long time, Uncle Daniel loved me, and we used to go out as a family. His niece, whom he loves so much, is being bullied, and there is no way he can forgive them. He told my mother-in-law that he would restore the price of the rented house to its original value. However, my mother-in-law immediately hit back at this. She immediately called my phone, but my mom took my phone and hung up.
"I don't think you should answer the phone for a while. Tell the company what happened and ask for a leave of absence."
I was certain certainly in no condition to work at the moment. I immediately called my boss and explained the situation. In fact, my boss is also a divorcee who had been bullied by her mother-in-law in the past. She says she understands how I feel now. She told me to put priority on resting my body for now anyway. And I took her at her word and decided to take a break from work for a while. While I was resting, my dad seemed to be working on various things, and later he brought a large envelope to me. In it, I found a lot of evidence of William's past infidelity. When I saw this, I felt something snap inside me. I'm not going to serve that family anymore. I felt like a fool for worrying about it. I immediately called William. William answered the phone and was furious. "You don't do your chores. Where are you now? The rent is going up because of you. Take responsibility." He said it was my fault for the rent hike, so he wants me to pay the rent from my salary. My husband is a pathetic man. If it had been me before, I would have been scared and complied with him. But now that I know what happened, I can't bring myself to follow my mother-in-law's or my husband's order. Later, my mother-in-law and William came to my parents' house and we decided to discuss the matter. My mother-in-law and William consistently said that the responsibility was mine. They wanted to lower the rent and tell me to come back now and do the housework. As for William, he has become a good laughingstock in the company now that his wife is gone. Both of them are very aggressive with me, asking me how I'm going to take this responsibility. This alone is enough to put my parents on the verge of an explosion. They had no idea that their daughter had been treated this way, and they were trembling with anger. In this situation, I put something out. It was a copy of the evidence of William's past infidelity. William's bravado disappeared when he saw the evidence of his infidelity in front of him. I was about to blow up when I saw William. who was now looking very pale.
What's this? You've been cheating on her, haven't you?
This startled even my mother-in-law. She stared at the document with trembling hands.
No, this is some kind of mistake. I didn't do this.
He says he didn't do anything, but his face is so clearly visible. No one would believe him if he said it wasn't him. I have always been quiet and at the mercy of the two of them. They didn't think I would go this far, and the two of them were completely unable to say anything. This alone was quite shocking, but in fact, William had another hidden secret. He had lied about his business trip and had been having an affair with a woman. I had been thinking that William had been traveling a lot recently. I genuinely thought he was busy with his work. I had no idea that he was on an affair trip until I found out the truth. Of course, the company fired William when they found out about it. They charged him for all the company's expenses spent on the affair trip. Having lost their jobs, William and my mother-in-law were naturally unable to pay the rent. Uncle Daniel told them that if they couldn't pay him, he wanted them to leave the house. He had been cursing me until now, but when he found himself in a tight spot, he said, "Please, Grace, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I will never cheat on you again. So let's start over, okay?"
I'm sorry. I'll change my mind too. So will you come back and help us?
What a convenient excuse. So I refused all calls and messages anymore. Suddenly, they couldn't contact me anymore, and they got impatient and came to my house and said, "Please, please help us. I can't live like this."
I beg you, Grace. My mom and I are sorry for what we have done. Please have mercy on us.
With that said, the two of them banged on the front door and shouted loudly, even though it was late at night. Naturally, the police arrived after that, and the two were taken away. After that, the two could no longer pay the rent, so they were evicted. evicted from the house and had to move out of the apartment. The apartment was decades old, and the drafts were terrible. They managed to find work, but the salary is low, and they have to save a lot to make ends meet. They have grown frustrated with their frugal lifestyle and fight every day. Meanwhile, I divorced William. The full amount of alimony was also transferred securely. Then I went back to my parents' house and recuperated for 3 months. After that, my health improved and I decided to return to work, thanks to the support of the people around me. I am able to enjoy my work every day. From now on, I will do my best while also cherishing my own